Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce's Ukraine War Frontline update for the 17th of January 2024. Before we get to the Frontline, I just want to share with you what Andrew Perpetua said. Sorry I posted losses from 2 days ago last night. It was the last thing I did before immediately falling asleep. I guess that's how tired I was. The man is seriously overworked, and I then shared what he shared on his feed, thinking it was last night's or yesterday's losses, and I said, I recognise these. That's how sad I am. I literally recognise the losses, and in fact, which ones were damaged and which ones were destroyed. And I thought, well, maybe he's just adding on to the previous day's losses. How I justified that, but he just posted the wrong thing. So this is yesterday's loss list, so I thought I'd share this with you. Again, it's a sort of 3-to-1 loss ratio, Russian to Ukrainian losses. Again, it does skew towards drones, but there are a few volcano possibly, so maybe a multiple launch rockets, or that's a precision guided munition from artillery, I believe. So a few different ways of having these destroyed, but most of them are drone losses. The Ukrainians have lost a couple of tanks, Bradley, M113, Max Pro, MRAP, so the usual kind of candidates for APCs and MRAPs and IFVs and whatnot, but Bradley is a sore loss, and then an unknown SPG there. The Russians have lost surveillance comms, a couple of engineering vehicles. In fact, that was They were both taken out in one, I believe. Oh, no, it's not. That's Skimlers. I saw two engineering vehicles that looked like two engineering vehicles taken out with a drone drop munition, actually. So it's interesting there are two there. Now, I wonder, I've seen more Russian engineering vehicles be lost recently, and I don't know whether the Russians are trying much harder now than they were at the beginning of the conflict to get damaged vehicles back to repair them because they are that desperate for vehicles. I mean, that would be me trying to work out why there are more engineering vehicles. Am I trying to be positive to the Ukrainians there? I don't know. I mean, I think we're seeing more engineering vehicles, and that's the most plausible explanation I can give. They just really need vehicles to send to the front line, and one of the best ways is getting damaged ones from the battlefield and doing them up. T-72s and T-80s taken out there, number of tanks, quite a few actually, and quite a few IFVs, and I think this represents the attack that took place in Avdiivka. We'll talk about that more in a second. So I think again we can surmise that the Russians have lost more stuff than the Ukrainians at a rate that is towards what the Ukrainians need. Sorry, whether it's enough at 3-to-1, I don't know, but that's the sort of equipment differential that I think Ukrainians do enjoy seeing. If you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out the legend on the screen at the moment. And we'll go to look at the mapping. As you can see, only one pin today. Thank you for JL who's done the mapping. He's been an absolute lifesaver for me recently for a long time now, because I am so busy. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. There are not a lot of changes along this northeastern axis from Kupiansk to Svatova to Crimea. There are these different theories and rumors that Russia are accumulating to attack in the Kupiansk area, that they're also looking to attack in the east and in the south. I just don't know. I don't know what the evidence is to support that, but the ISW and others seem to be thinking that could be an eventuality. We go to the ISW themselves, the Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank. They do say in the area, geolocated footage published on January the 15th indicates that Russian forces have advanced north of Rover. We'll come to that in a second because that's down to the south end of this axis in the forest. Russian mill bloggers citing alleged unspecified Ukrainian sources claim that Russian forces advanced near Makivka up to 2.2 kilometers in width and 1.7 kilometers in depth. Although the ISW has not observed any evidence for that. That was what we talked about yesterday with regard to the Makivka area, the Russians advancing possibly towards there. That came from no reports, but actually we already had that on our mapping, to be fair. So anyway, they are fairly close to Makivka, and it seems that that's an area where, I mean, anywhere along here, the Russians have been attacking and could attack. Over the course of this conflict, whether it be Kazimivka and Novoselivska, whether it be Ryarodka and this move towards, through Novoherivka, whether it be down near Makivka, Nevska, Terny, Torska, Yampolivka. I mean, all of these are places that the Russians are active or have been active. And then, of course, Sinkivka. There's still activity taking place up in Sinkivka and footage coming out there of the Russians trying to push to the south. According to Andrew Perpetua, there were possibly some successes for the Russians in the Persho-Travnevi area, somewhere around here, but he's unsure where that is, and not really sure of the evidence either. So that may or may not have happened. Nonetheless, some Russian claims to successes up there, and we'll look at the geolocated evidence to suggest some gains in the Dubrova forest, Dubrova area in the Serebryansky forest. Now, with this, I would suggest that not quite certain. I mean, there are IEDs being dropped. Southeast of Dubrova, in this place, something explodes, filmed and probably blown up by Carthia. A long time no see. I don't really know what it means by that, other than that possibly the source from that unit. I haven't seen them produce stuff for some time, but I don't know that this suggests, like with many geolocations, it doesn't necessarily suggest robust control of an area. And I think that one of the geolocations that comes later definitely suggests that, which is that they're moving forward to attack. They're hit there. That moving to attack means you're going to be moving through the grey area from your defensive positions through the grey area to attack the Ukrainian defensive position. It means if you're hit in the grey area, it doesn't mean you have advanced there. You are in the process of advancing in the sense of moving forward as a column or as a unit or whatever. But if you're repelled, blown up, whatever, and you're unsuccessful, you go back to your defensive line. That doesn't suggest any advance forward in terms of territorial gain. So I'm always a little bit guarded as how the ISW couch these claims. So indicates Russian forces advance north of Dubrova. Well, actually, is according to it's according to Suret maps, that's behind their defensive line, but it is quite a long way forward from Andrew Perpetua. But he said on his live stream last night that he doesn't like mapping. Again, he said this many times, doesn't like mapping in a forest because you can't really geolocate stuff very easily when it's just tree cover. So he has a much larger grey zone. So rather than being sure where the Russians are, he's like, yeah, I've extended the grey zone, so this will be within the grey zone. So that pin would basically confirm or not disconfirm either of those mappers. Anyway, some activity in the Serebryansky forest is what we can gather from there. Right, now let's push a little bit further to the south. There has been some gains in Bilohorivka. Andrew Perpetua, admitting that the Russians have taken some, which we reported over the last couple of days, but just to verify this, or confirm it, that they've taken some area over to the east of the Bilohorivka, I don't know what you call it, area, sector. He says that it's not particularly important what they've taken, and it does go backwards and forwards. As I mentioned yesterday, this area is particularly difficult in terms of fighting. He was talking about this particular area here. I showed you the topography yesterday, but this particular area is somewhere where the Russians have taken before. I think this is where they're talking about. So the Russians are coming down this sort of cliff face and then fighting up here onto this tree line, about the same kind of height as so that's 102 meters over there. That's about 117 meters, a little bit higher over on that cliff. But basically, you come down, then they take this tree line. They've taken it before, but the problem is it becomes very difficult for them to resupply, and so they kind of get cut off by supply. Very difficult to get, supplies down and then up. Quite difficult terrain. So holding onto this tree line is a difficult thing for the Russians to do, and so that's, I think, the idea is that they've taken it and lost it before because of resupply issues. Nonetheless, anyway, that's Bilohorivka. There's still quite a bit of activity in the Seversk front as a whole, Spirna, and in this general area. The Russians are pushing. There is activity. No changes to the mapping in the last 24 hours, as according to the sources I use. And then we get to Bakhmut. We'll come back to the ISW. That says of Bakhmut, geolocated footage published on the 15th indicates that Russian forces recently marginally advanced north of Klishivka. And again, this is one of these that I don't think signifies an advance. It's a repelled attack. So Ukrainians 5th Brigade repelled a mechanized assault on Klishchiivka Heights. Again, quite a bit of mechanized equipment being used here. This has been geolocated to the area. Somebody's saying quick location proof, but I'm not doing anything on the vehicles yet because it's too hard to judge what the damage is. So again, potentially some lost vehicles here, adding to a verification really of the losses that I've been talking about over the last couple of days as per the general staff. So I think Avdiivka, and we'll talk about Avdiivka soon, there are 3 columns attacking there that arguably were completely repelled. I'm not 100% sure yet, but also activity along this higher ground as it comes to the west of Klishchiivka, northwest of Klishchiivka. The Russians trying to get robust control over this because it will help them with gaining and maintaining control over the French network here on the heights over Klishchiivka. It still doesn't appear like they have full control of that. Surrey Maps indicates that they have, but has done for some time. Has not changed that. There's a long-term disagreement here, and I think of all the disagreements on the front line, this is probably one of the most significant, because if the Russians really did control all of this trench network area, and that's what Surrey Maps is saying, that's a defensive line for the Russians, which means everywhere else beyond that is a grey zone, but this is controlled area for the Russians. If they genuinely controlled that, then really they'd be controlling Klishchiivka, and I'm sure it would be relatively easy to expand that control further to the south and onwards. Like, I think the long-term disagreement between the mappers here indicates, in my opinion, that Surrey Maps is probably incorrect in their claims. Anyway, make of that what you will. Agree to disagree if you want. Right, so that is what the ISW really says. There's not too much else to mention there, which is all very interesting because there's all this talk about potential big offensives here, there, and everywhere. But actually, there are some localized assaults in certain places, but there's no change to the frontline mapping apart from one small area here, as according to all the mappers, and the ISW has very small sort of detail for each of these places, very, very small amounts of detail. As we come down to Avdiivka, what does it say here? Positional fighting continuing. Ukrainian Taver's Group of Forces Commander Brigadier General Alexander Tarnavsky stated that Russian forces intensified assaults with armoured vehicle support in the Taver's direction, in all this general direction, a wide area ranging from Avdiivka all the way through western Zaporizhzhia Oblast. I don't know why they use Tavrisk area as a determiner, because it basically references this entire area. I mean, it's huge. It tells me very little. That's one of those words that I don't like being used. Likely referring to Avdiivka and Mariinka directions. So, yeah, so intensified assaults with armored vehicle supports. Having said that, they might be intensifying them, but there's not too much change at the moment, as you can see. Just this one small change, as according to Surrey Maps, looks like a minor rejig as opposed to anything. And that is just around the Shumi area. And to remind you that this general region, the New York was badly hit, but other places as well around here have been hit by aviation really quite badly. So they are continuing to hammer some of these settlements. The same can be said about areas down to the south. For example, Kurakove around here is getting hammered quite a bit, and that's where the Russians really want to be getting to from Mariinka. As they advance there past Herivka. So they are kind of shaping these places with aviation attacks. Anyway, we're going to have a look at Avdiivka for a little bit. Some of the sources say, well, okay, we'll have a look at this video, but I'll just let you know where we're really looking at first. So, although there are no changes according to the mappers, when we look at the northern part of this cauldron, you have Kamyanka, you've got Vesely up here, and it's basically around this Vesely area that there were 3 columns attacking yesterday. So one, I think, came around this lake and then down here and across. Another one came down here. I don't know where a third one came, and Andrew was talking about that on his live stream. Go and check it out. He does quite a bit of analysis of what happened here. Indeed, his map looks something like this. So that's the column that we're just about to see on the video did this, and then a bunch of that stuff was blown up. But we don't really know, or haven't seen the video footage yet of what happened to the rest of the stuff and whether it was as disastrous as previous ones have been. And there, as mentioned, another one down here and another one somewhere else apparently. So this is the beginning of the video. As this source says, the column advances from the direction of the village of Vasile, breaking through the fields directly towards Avdiivka. Just slightly over a month ago, the Russians made an attempt to attack here, but they were defeated before advancing beyond the village of Vasile. So they have done this before, and they've lost hugely before. So although I can't show you all of the hits on, or the attempted hits and the activity, I can show you the sheer number of vehicles being used here, and then this goes towards the high numbers of losses that were reported by the General Staff. As you can see there's the front one, and there are others behind. As these continue, you start making out that actually there's quite a few of these vehicles coming in. This is a fairly significant column. All of these will, of course, be full of troops. That's a 6 vehicle column, I think, at the moment there. 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I don't know, more come along a little bit later as well. And then, yeah, it gets targeted. And they lose a bunch, as you can see from this map that Andrew's map here. In fact, if we come in a little bit, you can go and look at all the information. I think, because I know around here there were some older losses as well. I don't know. I presume all of these new pins are for the new losses and don't refer to the older losses. Nonetheless, there we go. The doorbell's going. My kids are here. It's not a problem. So yeah, as I say, I'm not 100% sure what those pins definitely refer to, but this is the conversation that was had on Andrew's live stream.
What do you think about the prospects of that angle of attack there? Because it's quite an open field.
It is not the first time they've attacked this field, and every single time it's gone really bad. Like, almost 100% casualties every single time. It's been incredible to watch. I remember one time they drove down, like, here, down to, like, over here, and then, like, drove this way, and just got obliterated in this field. And the other time, they kind of drove down here and crossed here, and they got obliterated all here. A bunch of these vehicles that are destroyed along this the stretch of wood, you could see in that video, were all old from this attack. I can't remember when that attack happened. It was like...
Which intimates that those pins are new ones, because if he's saying along there were a bunch of old ones, then yeah.
It was a long time ago. I want to say...
So anyway, the point being, I mean, you can go and listen to their general analysis of that whole attack, but the general idea is trying the same thing again and expecting different results. This is this mantra that we keep seeing repeated time and time again, and wonder why they're taking these huge losses, the Russians. It is just, it seems to be a catastrophic tactical naivety to me, but you know, what do I know? Again, it's all about piecing these bits of the jigsaw together to see what picture is presented, and does that picture look like the picture painted by the General Staff and the Ukrainians? And I think yes, I think the statistics that we are hearing from the General Staff are justifiable, at least to some degree. The Russians are losing large numbers of vehicles and troops, and indeed in that attack, you can see the back vehicle is here, and then a whole bunch of people get out and run away. And you're thinking, okay, if that many people are in each of those vehicles, and some of those vehicles catastrophically blow up, then you know, what does that say about the personnel losses as much as the vehicle losses? And I've seen plenty of other bits of footage of Ukrainians taking out. I think it was near Sinkivka, where a group of 7 people were just like taken out in a tree line. You're thinking, yeah, okay, you add up all these together, and it does equate to very substantial Russian losses. And then, of course, as I say all the time, but the question is, what are the losses for the Ukrainians? Are they taking similar losses? And we know that it is really heavy in some of these places. Avdiivka is really challenging and has been challenging for a long time. Krinky is very challenging for the Ukrainians at the moment. Avdiivka is actually particularly challenging for the people that still live there. Like, you wouldn't believe it, but Andrew was saying that the estimates are that about 1,300 people still live there. And then what he said was really important is that the residents all live in this kind of main area here, right? This is where the people still remaining in Avdiivka appear to be mainly living. And he says that the Russians absolutely hammer that the whole time, which is this idea that the Russians know that that's where the civilians are, and they're hammering it anyway. Again, it talks to kind of war crimes and the targeting of civilians. And he is like, I just don't get it how they still live there. But they still do get supplies, taken into them. There's a picture of them all receiving like a loaf of bread and whatnot. It's just insane to think the amount of aviation strikes, and there were some heavy ones yesterday on Avdiivka, right across Avdiivka, but also in that residential area there. Thinking, goodness me, you must have no other option. That's what you think is the best course of action, to remain in Avdiivka, in like one of the hottest war zones. That has been one of the hottest war zones for over a year, right? Just goodness me, incredible. Anyway, as we come further to the south, there's not too much to report. Indeed, going all the way around, I don't think. I don't think there's. Just a conditions observation here. So a Russian mill blogger claimed that recent freezing temperatures near Donetsk city, so this is basically Avdiivka where we are, but also to the south by Mariinka and Novomykhailivka, were more conducive to mechanized maneuver, but that dense minefields impeded Russian armored vehicles from moving forward. The Russian mill blogger claimed that relatively warmer weather is currently constraining mechanized maneuver, and that Russian armored vehicles are getting stuck in ruts created by armored vehicle tracks. So you get the ruts, which themselves can be challenging if they're hard ruts, but then as soon as they start softening, as a thaw comes along, then that turns into just pure mud, and you get into trouble. Still challenges for the Ukrainians north of Mariinka in this general area. The Russians are still pushing there. I think they're pushing as well, possibly in Pervomaysky and north of there somewhere. Andrew is talking about that. Has some indication that the Russians somewhere there, it could be anywhere in that general area, are having some success in pushing. And then Novomykhailivka, interestingly, he said yesterday when there was this big, long advance, what appeared like an advance, he was actually like, lots of people are saying, and I can't remember how I communicated it yesterday, but it was like all the way, I think it was this one field, that width, all the way down here, that changed hands, or the Russian defensive line moved all that distance. But he was saying that actually he had a feeling that had been the same since, I don't know, when he said June or July or something, but he just didn't have video evidence. And when there were these attacks up the tree line up here, so this is where the Russians did take some ground, this area there, he said in taking that area there, it allowed him to verify that actually they controlled all of this. So he moved it all, but it wasn't like yesterday they did this big attack that took that all of that ground. So that's just a useful qualifier there. But as we come past Velika Novoselka and Robotina, not really much to report in those areas. As you can see from the ISW, nothing in there really that's worth noting. Although there is one source here from Rebar. So Rebar, the pro-Russian source, says Orikhiv sector positional battles and advance of the Russian forces near Babove. So he's claiming, very pro-Russian source, more often than not, just in line with what the Russian MOD is saying, claiming the Russians are advancing in the Babove area. Positional battles are taking place in the sector. Russian troops are trying to improve their tactical position while the enemy is bringing in uniformed units to fill the gaps in the defense. Tell us much that. The main focus on the section west of Babove, there the Russian armed forces have advanced up to half a kilometer on the positions left in the summer during the Ukrainian counteroffensive. I love this, like scare quotes, counteroffensive. Well, it was. Whether it took enough or not is irrelevant. There's no need to be counter-offensive, I guess. Ukrainian attacks continue at the Kopani-Robotyne line, which is an interesting omission if this is the case. So the idea that the Ukrainians are still attacking in this area could be worth noting. The activity of enemy drones has decreased under bad weather conditions. However, the intensity of mutual use of artillery remains the same. In addition, the Ukrainians became more active in the direction of Pyatikhatki, where the Russian armed forces have captured several strongholds in the course of several attacks. I don't know exactly what time frame he's using to talk about that, but it's the idea that over to the west in this area, in Pyatikhatki, that the Ukrainians are attacking on the back of some Russian gains at some undescribed time. So there could be an uptick in activity there. And then we come down to Dnipro River and really to Krinky. Interesting that Andrew is saying that there are some claims, yet again, that the Ukrainians have expanded their bridgehead here. So what we've seen, as according to Suryak maps, is that the Russians appear to be squeezing. Andrew Perpetua hasn't gone with that. He hasn't moved his mapping in that area, but it is to accept that this is grey zone here, and that the Russians will be in that area and fighting for it. They don't robustly control it, but he hinted that the Ukrainians might well have expanded their bridgehead over to the west, the southwest. So that's significant if it has happened. There's not a lot to say in the ISW, although I've highlighted a lot. I will go through it. There's huge movements or anything. So Ukrainian forces maintain positions on the left bank amid continued positional fighting. No confirmed changes. Russian and Ukrainian sources stated that positional engagements continue on the east bank, including, and the reason I highlighted this part, including Krinky and Pischanivka, because we keep hearing about Krinky, but actually I've heard nothing about Pischanivka and Pidstepny over here for some time. If there are positional battles here, that would indicate that the Ukrainians are there in some way. Don't know, haven't heard anything about it for an awful long time. All about Krinky, really. Nonetheless, there is that. Recently collected satellite imagery indicates that Russian forces have repeatedly attempted to counterattack near Krinky with small detachments along the M14 highway. Satellite imagery indicates that Russian forces are preparing to defend the area beyond Krinky, including the M14 highway, along which Russian forces have built a 0.5 kilometer trench and other defensive positions. And I showed you satellite imagery of that. They're probably referring to the same source that I showed you. Was it Emil Castelhelmi or another one? I can't remember. Anyway, it's in this area. This is the M14, and there are trench lines built on the south side of that road. So it will be, like I've said before, in terms of the counteroffensive at large, but also here at Krinky, the longer it takes for the Ukrainians to expand this bridgehead, the more time the Russians have got to just dig the crap out of this whole area. Every month matters, because every month is further fortifications that the Ukrainians will eventually have to overcome. The Russians, eventually, this is just going to become just some hugely entrenched fortified area. I mean, who would want to live in such a place, really? It's a war zone. I don't know, but it arguably, you could see these lines becoming more and more difficult to take. That the longer this goes on, the more likely it goes towards a stasis, a stalemate, whereby both sides have built incredibly involved fortifications and laid a gazillion mines to the point that neither side, with the drone spotting that's going on, and the skies swarming with drones, it's so difficult to take ground. Visual combined armed maneuvers and what. Anyway, that's my analysis for what it's worth. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all your support. Thank you for those who have kindly assisted with PayPal, buy me a coffee, and super thanks, especially in the live the other day, as I'm preparing to get my stuff together to go to Ukraine. I need to get things like cameras and whatnots. Thanks to John Larkin, who put in a super thanks right at the end after I'd already pressed stop, but there's a lag between live and what I do, and so people can say things and do things even after I've pressed stop. for like 30 seconds, and he did that. So I didn't get a chance to say thanks to John Larkin, but thank you. Take care. Speak soon.